Welcome to the Consider This channel. This is Chapter 11 of Evidence of Soul by Sharon Patrice. Beginning of Life and Soul. Part 1. As we are aware, from previous chapters, life on Earth is estimated to be at least 3.5 billion to 4.41 billion years old. It appears to have suddenly come into being after the formation of the Earth, according to archaeologists. The earliest direct evidence of life on this planet is from microfossils of microorganisms in 3.465 billion-year-old rocks in Australia. Other evidence includes stromatolites, graphite, and remains of biotic life in rocks ranging from 3.48 to 4.1 billion years old. The notion that living beings originated from inanimate materials comes from the ancient Greek theory known as spontaneous generation. Aristotle, around 1,600 years ago, gave what he considered a proper explanation when he wrote, "So with animals, some spring from parent animals according to their kind, whilst others grow spontaneously, and not from kindred stock, and of these instances of spontaneous generation, some come from putrefying earth or vegetable matter, as is the case with a number of insects, while others are spontaneously generated, in the inside of animals out of the secretions of their several organs." An Italian physician, by the name of Francesco Redi, demonstrated in 1668 that maggots developed from rotten meat, but only in a container without a lid. The maggots did not develop in a closed container. He concluded that, all life comes from life, and yes, it surely does, but it was not until the hypothesis offered up by Erasmus Darwin and his genuinely genius grandson, Charles, concerning the theory of evolution, that more seriously minded folk started to investigate the concept, and begun theorizing on the original life form from whom we all descend. Where life came from or how it first formed has had many academics reduced to a heap of fidgeting puzzlement. One recent theory, which is still discussed to this day, is the primordial soup hypothesis, and is still considered, by some, to be scientifically true or as near to the truth as we can grasp with our present understanding, and that is that life, all life, evolved from a big slushy primordial soup of minerals, chemicals, and whatever else had been thrown in for good measure. A slushy soup that made up the entirety of our planet's oceans. The primordial soup theory. Although Darwin did not speak explicitly about the origin of life in his On the Origin of Species book, he did reference a warm little pond in a letter to the British botanist and explorer Joseph Dalton Hooker, dated the 1st of February, 1871, where he writes, "It is often said that all the conditions for the first production of a living being are now present, which could ever have been present. But if, and oh what a big if, we could conceive in some warm little pond with all sort of ammonia and phosphoric salts, light, heat, electricity present, that a protein compound was chemically formed, ready to undergo still more complex changes, at the present such matter would be instantly devoured, or absorbed, which would not have been the case before living creatures were formed." The primordial soup theory is the hypothetical set of conditions present on planet Earth around 3.7 to 4.0 billion years ago. It is an aspect of the heterotrophic theory, concerning the origin of life, first proposed by Soviet biochemist Alexander Oparin in 1924, and then later backed up in 1929 by a British Indian scientist who worked in physiology, genetics, evolutionary biology, and mathematics by the name of John Haldane. According to Oparin, the primitive Earth's surface layers, carbon, hydrogen, water vapor, and ammonia reacted to form the first organic compounds. The concept of a primordial soup gained acceptance in 1953, when papers of an experiment by American chemist named Stanley Miller and an American physical chemist named Harold Urey, named the Miller-Urey experiment, were published. The experiment was conducted at the University of Chicago by Miller and supervised by Urey, and simulated, some believe with some accuracy, the simulated conditions, thought at the time to be present in the atmosphere of the early prebiotic Earth, in order to test the hypothesis of the chemical origin of life under those conditions. The experiment used a highly decreased mixture of gases water, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen, to form fundamental organic monomers, such as amino acids, and an electric arc to simulating lightning. Why lightning? Well, it's believed one of the key ingredients needed for life is phosphorus, and with the abundant quantity of lightning strikes that happened when Earth was a mere youngster, lightning was something believed to have happened with frequency, and may have unlocked the necessary amount of phosphorus to create the foundation for life. Amino acids are compounds that contain both amino and carboxylic acid functional groups. Although over 500 amino acids exist in nature, by far the most important are the 22 amino acids incorporated into proteins. It is only these 22 that appear in the genetic code of all life on Earth, and the use of the electric arc in the experiment, which simulated a strike of lightning to the mixture, turning the water not just into gas, but glorious plasma. The Miller-Urey experiments produced evidence that conditions on early Earth could produce RNA, the predecessor to DNA. When the papers of the experiment were published, many supported the Miller-Urey theory, hailing it as conclusive evidence to the conceptional conditions on primitive Earth, which brought about a chemical reaction that changed more complex compounds from simple inorganic precursors to life. It was regarded as groundbreaking. When Charles Darwin wrote, "But if, and oh what a big if, we could conceive in some warm little pond with all sorts of ammonia and phosphoric salts, light, heat and electricity present, that a protein compound was chemically formed, ready to undergo still more complex changes." He really was not far off. Moving forward from the soup and lightning theory, it has also been proposed that life may have emerged from ridiculously hot alkaline vents under the oceans, rather than one almighty lightning strike, or several. It has been suggested the alkaline vents under the sea, probably based on ribonucleic acid, caused a one-off single-cell life form. In time, lots and lots of time, it is theorized, the one-cell life form diverged from the one single-cell organism into two main groups of bacteria and archaea. Life remained mostly small, in fact microscopic, until multicellular life arose around 580 million years ago. So, what about the hot alkaline vents? A hydrothermal vent, also known as a hot alkaline vent, is basically a break in the ocean floor, where extreme heat escapes from beneath the Earth's crust, causing heated water to discharge. There are two types of hydrothermal vents under the oceans, known as black or white smokers. These vents have been hypothesized to have been a significant factor to starting abiogenesis and the survival of primitive life forms. Hydrothermal vents in the deep ocean typically form along the mid-ocean ridges where two tectonic plates are diverging and new crust is being formed. In contrast to the approximately 2 degrees Celsius, that's around 36 degrees Fahrenheit ambient temperature of seawater at these depths, water emerges from these vents at a physical property of up to 464 degrees Celsius, that's 867 degrees Fahrenheit high. Black smokers. A black smoker, or deep-sea vent, is a type of hydrothermal vent found on the ocean floor, usually in the bathyal zone. The bathyal, or bathypelagic, zone is the area of the ocean between 3,300 feet, which is around 1.00584 kilometers, to 13,000 feet, that's 39,624 kilometers deep. The bathyal zone is in permanent darkness, although a tiny shard of sunlight at the blue end of the spectrum does reach down. These black smokers materialize as black, chimney-like structures that emit a cloud of black physical particles with levels of sulfur minerals, or sulfides. White smokers. White smoker blowholes emit a much lighter color and property of mineral, such as barium, calcium, and silicon. White smoker vents also tend to have a lower temperature discharge owing to their extended distance from their heat source. The further away, the more contaminated by seawater, brings about the less heat. The temperatures of white smokers range from 260 degrees Celsius up to around 300 degrees Celsius, that's 500 degrees Fahrenheit, to around 572 degrees Fahrenheit. German chemist turned patent lawyer, Günther Wächtershaus, proposed a theory suggesting that life may have originated at hydrothermal vents. He proposed that an early form of metabolism predated genetics. In other words, a cycle of chemical reactions that release energy in a form that can be harnessed by other processes. The theory is, amino acid synthesis could have occurred deep within the Earth's crust, and was subsequently shot up along with hydrothermal fluids into much cooler waters, where lower temperatures and the presence of clay minerals would have fostered the formation of peptids and protocells. To those knowledgeable, this hypothesis is incredibly attractive owing to the abundance of methane and ammonia present in hydrothermal vent regions. It should be noted that numerous species of extremophiles and microorganisms have been found living immediately around deep-sea vents, suggesting that this is indeed a scenario. It is believed, by some, white smokers would be more suitable for emerging life, and experimental research indicates, the surfaces of mineral particles inside these hydrothermal vents have similar catalytic properties to enzymes and are able to create simple organic molecules. Nonetheless, and there is always a nonetheless, not all those who know about such things agree in the smoker theory. So far, in this chapter, we have looked at both the primordial soup with a side order of lightning and the hydrothermal vents hypothesis, and we have done so to help us understand how life may have started on Earth. And as ever, with any new or unproven theory, there are always more questions than answers. In the last chapter we took a glimpse into the world of plasma, in particular, the wonderful world of dusty and living sentient plasmas, and while these theoretical assumptions are all quite different, they are not. Each of these hypotheses appear to need the element of heat, immense heat. In fact, lightning can heat the air it passes through to 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit, that is 27,760 degrees Celsius, which is, by the way, 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. This gives us an immense divergence in heat value between the lightning and vent theories. While it is possible for heat to create plasma, it is unlikely that the heat from hydrothermal vents would be sufficient to do so. The temperature required to create plasma varies depending on the gas being ionized, but it is generally much higher than the temperatures found at hydrothermal vent. You may remember, from a previous chapter, Dr. Massimo Teodorani's research on living sentient plasma, which led him to question if elementary particles constituting plasma, when working in unison together, give rise to the emergence of consciousness. This question sounds bizarre, but wait, think on. The human mind, for example, works by pulsating electricity from neuron to neuron through a hugely complicated network of neurons. Neurons have 3 distinctive parts, including a cell body, an axon, which is the nerve fiber portion of the neuron that carries impulses away from the cell body, and dendrites, which receives input from other cell bodies. These parts allow the neurons to send and receive chemical and electrical messages, and provide us with a consciousness. For example, a cut finger triggers the message to the brain that the finger needs attention. We are then conscious of the fact we need to tend to that finger. Since our bodies are a huge mass of atoms, we can and do generate our own electricity. In fact, we are our own self-sufficient powerhouse. When we talk about the nervous system sending messages to the brain, what we are actually talking about is electricity carrying messages between neurons. Electricity is a must-have to send signals throughout the body and to the brain, making it possible for us to move, think, and feel. The electricity produced by our bodies is what allows synapses, signals, even heartbeats, to occur, and nearly all of our cells have the ability to generate electricity. According to Teodorani's hypothesis, known as the intelligent plasma hypothesis, plasma, which sometimes behaves as a quantum coherent medium, may correspond to the behavior of the microtubules in the brain. The behavior of plasma under particular conditions appears to simulate DNA. Dr. Teodorani proposes that some light phenomena, such as the Hessdalen lights, may be a form of living plasma that has some degree of consciousness. The Hessdalen lights, by the way, are unidentified lights which have been observed in the Hessdalen Valley in Norway. The lights are of unknown origin. Teodorani suggests that this plasma-based life form may be capable of responding to external stimuli such as electromagnetic fields. It is important to note that this is a speculative theory and not a scientifically proven fact, as yet, but awesome, nevertheless. At this point some may ask, if life started through any of the hypotheses we have looked at so far, surely there would be millions of one-cell organisms being produced constantly with billions of descendants not connected by the same DNA as all other life forms on Earth, because if one life form started with its particular attributes, surely many others would have done so too? Rationally, this question applies to all concepts put forward on the beginning of life on Earth. Yet, it is known that all extremophiles, as living organisms, share their DNA with all other life forms on our planet, so there is no reason to believe these microorganisms surrounding or extremely near to the hydrothermal vents are from a different life-forming event. Which leads to the question, if life on Earth is estimated to be at least 3.5 billion to 4.41 billion years old, why did multicell organisms not show themselves until roughly 600 to 700 million years ago? The answer may come from Charles Darwin and Luca. Who is Luca? Starting from ourselves and working back to the last universal common ancestor, also known as Luca, is the starting point to identify the first single-cell organism in our chain of DNA. If we can identify the very first living organism, then we have a fighting chance of working out where, when, and how LUCA came into being. Looking at DNA as a tree, and each branch being a specific form of life, it has been found, with cross-referencing, that we can be sure the first 3 branches to emerge from the trunk were bacterium, eukarya, and archaea. While each of these 3 are different forms of life, they are all similar in many ways, and share DNA. For the purpose of reference, we humans are descended from eukarya. What is the difference between DNA and RNA? DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, and RNA, ribonucleic acid, are the 2 types of nucleic acids found in cells. Nucleic acids, in turn, are the biological molecules that code for genetic information and proteins. It is what makes you well, you. RNA has a wonderful capability as a genetic molecule and came before DNA. RNA once had to carry on the hereditary processes on its own, and it now seems certain that RNA was the first molecule to hold and pass on genetic endowment, which means it passed on its familiar physical and biological history to its descendants, and so it evolved all the essential methods for storing and expressing genetic information long before DNA hit the scene. However, single-stranded RNA is quite unstable, and is easily damaged by enzymes. By doubling its single-strand molecule, thereby stabilizing its structure, it is believed DNA was born and evolved as a much stronger stable form to pass genetic information with accuracy. This is evolution at its most fascinating level. LUCA certainly must have had, obviously had a genetic code. But its genetic material, found to date, was DNA, so that it lived after the change from RNA. While the actual anatomy of LUCA cannot be reconstructed with certainty, its biochemical mechanisms can be described in some detail, based on the universal properties currently shared by all life forms from gut-churning bacteria to humans. Life evolved through necessity, not choice. The evidence of evolution bears witness to consciousness. If that first single-celled LUCA were not aware of self, it would not have been alert to its need to up its game in order for it and its form to survive. I am not suggesting it had a personality. I am not saying it went down the hottest vent on a Friday night with its mate. Rather, I'm saying it is by proven mathematical equation and unquestionable science that we learn our original ancestor felt the need, or took the decision, to change in order to survive. That is consciousness. What made it aware, and what gave a selection of non-living matter or just dusty particles the awareness it developed, is the million-dollar question. Chemical engineer Arvin Ash has a wonderfully calm way of teaching, so much so that he makes the quest to find LUCA sound like a task we humans may very well achieve. If you are unfamiliar with his work, I can highly recommend a visit to his online presence at arvinash.com. Ash asks, how is it that the seemingly unremarkable processes of geology, chemistry, and physics could have combined in precisely the correct sequence to produce the first living matter from non-living matter? He goes on to suggest before life began on Earth, there had to have been 3 main elements. Nucleic acid to form the RNA which, as we are aware, carries the program for life. Proteins, which he describes as the cellular workhorses that perform the important functions of your body. Lastly, lipids which encapsulate the cells of your body. These 3 ingredients, he insists, must have been present in that primordial soup for life to start. His theory is that out of all the 3 ingredients, lipids, which make up cell walls, are the most important. He goes on to inform us why lipids are so important and states because without the cell wall or a way to encapsulate certain elements within the soup, there would just be a soup of material disorderly floating around in a liquid. It would not be functioning inside something that could potentially self-replicate. I believe most would agree with his theory. If we go with the soup and lightning hypothesis or even the hot vent theory, we must agree lightning did not just magically strike water on one occasion and somehow life was born, nor did Old Smoky blow one day, and somehow shot out a one-off, and created life. There must have been a combination of elements together. Lovely lipids. Lipids, broadly defined, are small molecules hydrophobic at one end and amphiphilic at the other end. Hydrophobic, in chemistry, is the physical property of a molecule that is ostensibly repelled by water. In contrast, Hydrophiles are attracted to water. To put it simply, the round head of the lipid loves water but the tail part does not, and so they huddle together and form structures that keep the head in water and the tail dry. The lipid is not alive, as we know life to be. It is a chemical. Ash goes on to explain, because these lipid membranes could potentially form around other elements, they could bring distinct parts of various chemicals together that could potentially interact, combine, react, and work together to perhaps, eventually, form a machinery for self-replication. So, these fatty membranes, composed of lipids, were critical components in abiogenesis. He suggests any study of the beginning of life, known as abiogenesis, should start with a good look at lipids. This, in our quest to find soul, is awe-inspiringly splendid. Ash gives, perhaps a starting point at where soul and life may have united. Ash continues, but where do lipids come from? It was once thought they could only be produced from living cells, but experiments have shown that when carbon monoxide and hydrogen is heated up with minerals commonly found in Earth's crust, lipids can form. He goes on to state, all components were available in the early Earth and could have happened in underwater hydrothermal vents. This is the end of Chapter 11. Thank you for watching, but before you hop on over to Chapter 12, do the kid a favor and please, hit that subscribe button, like and share. I'll see you in the next chapter.